Meet Donna Adelson from Coral Springs, Florida. I want to hear all about you, Donna. Let's go.
Well, I'm a domestic coordinator.
A domestic coordinator?
Yes. I'm responsible for the activities, classes, and lessons of my son Robert, who is 16, Charlie, who is 12, Wendi, who is 10, my husband Harvey, who's in the audience, and my dog Sam.
All right. And how old is Sam?
5.
5. Well, good. Give him our best. Nice to have you here. And this is vowels worth nothing. Consonants are going to be worth. Can we get 800? We can. All right. So I'm writing on this. Again, person is a category. Stu, still your turn. Letter, please. L. No L. Donna.
M.
Yes, there are 2 M's. Let them come up. You have 5 seconds. Person. Alan. K. Yes. K.
Mustard maker.
Nope.
Mustard
Still
maker.
Stu.
H, please.
Yes, there's 1 H. Time starts now. Person. Donna.
F.
Yes.
Mischief maker.
Yeah, that's.
Nice.
You are listening to the Roberta Glass True Crime Report, putting the true back in true crime. From New York City, Roberta Glass is now on the record.
Okay. How is everybody? Thanks for your patience. There was a kite flying party near me with a whole marching band of drums. It was unreal. So I had to just start a little bit later. I was like, is this a joke? Is this a joke? But wanted to talk today about who's the mastermind in the murder of Dan Markel. Something I talked about with Patty of Patty's Playhouse. She feels Wendy's the mastermind. And I have just a more complicated opinion, I guess. I don't think it's so easy to say in this who's running the show. And with the family dynamics of psychopathy, narcissism, really hard to know who, and also passive aggressive style of Wendi Adelson, where she's always the victim. So I think Wendy's problem in this case became the family problem, because anything that happens to one Adelson, and I'm not talking about Robert here, of course, I'm talking about the enmeshed four-headed monster that is the Adelson family. So anything that happens to one member of the family happens to all of them. And so at the time, Wendi was facing possible sanction by Dan Markel, or by a sanction of her legal license. Dan Markel was challenging Wendi in court, saying that she lied about her financial records and her legal records, her financial records during the divorce, working out the divorce, and that she could be sanctioned at best, or admonished at best, really, sanctioned, or have her law license taken away at worst. I don't think that was ever going to happen, but it would have been a huge embarrassment already. And there were already allegations that their reputations were suffering. They were working so Tallahassee is so small, and FSU, Florida State University, is so small that his reputation and her reputation were suffering from this really contentious divorce. Certainly, if you listen to Jeffrey Lacasse, his opinion of Dan Markel, he felt later on was entirely colored by Wendi Adelson and what he called I think he called it the family pastime, hobby. Let me know exactly what the word was. I may be misquoting him there, was hating Dan Markel. So I think Wendi came with this problem that she was unhappy, and Donna was constantly looking to fix it. I mean, that's what those emails are about. Get to him, take control, punish him. So all the ways to getting control of Dan Markel and taking away his control, that's something that she expressly says, meaning Donna expressly says in her emails to Wendi, take control. Those are the things important to him. Control in his time with the kids. Take those things away. And when he couldn't be controlled, and the way Donna saw it, and I believe the family saw it, is that he was an out of control zealot. And so someone who is a zealot cannot be reasoned with. So I think Wendi and Donna, probably thinking very similarly, had the same kind of thoughts. I think Wendi waited for Donna to say it, and I think Wendi helped with the planning. This is just a theory. Wendi is an unindicted co-conspirator, as is Harvey. They are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. So this is just a theory, just speculation, just a theory on what we know. But I think Donna is, as the domestic coordinator, we already know that she made the date with the Geek Squad for Wendi. She washed the money and delivered the money. That's what the state has proven in the past, or alleged in the past. I don't know if it's really proven until it's Donna's trial, that she dropped off this money. This is something that the defense is desperate to disprove. That ultimately she was the one coming up with and Charlie were the ones who worked out the details of how it was done. So leave it to Charlie to find the shooter or shooters. Leave it to Katie to be the middle woman. Leave it to Donna to get the money there and get the alibi. And if as long as no one talked, everyone was going to be okay. So I think that I don't know. I think they're both. I think the whole family is the mastermind. I mean, I don't think you can put it at one person. It was a family group effort. I think Harvey was the least in it with the planning. When you hear the jailhouse calls between Donna and Charlie, the undercover calls between Donna and Charlie, don't tell Dad, he's a hothead. I don't think he was good at any of this, although he does get consulted at one point during the bump, but he was the last to find out, I think, his money. Let's look at what the states think. So originally, this was the original mock-up of the conspirators in the case, right? So you have Wendi is connected to, it's more like a web. So the entire family being at the top, and the only one connected to Dan Markel directly is Wendi, and then then the connection goes Charlie to Katie, Katie to Sigfredo, and Sigfredo to Luis Rivera, and Harvey is at the edge there with no Webbs, and no Webbs being joined with Donna. Now they have worked out a new conspirator map for Donna's trial. This is on Murder by Maestro's Twitter. Do you guys see that? So Donna's on the top. Harvey again is out on the cold. It goes to Donna, to Wendi and Charlie, Charlie to Katie, Katie to Sigfredo, Sigfredo to Luis, and the only one connected to Dan again is Wendi. So it's like a family tree here. It branches out in one way to the left to Dan Markel and from Wendi, and to the other way to Charlie. But Donna as on the top here, the bigger picture, the more involved person. So I guess they're setting it up to say Donna was really running this show. Everybody else was helpers, but she was the one who was running it. So pretty interesting. Also, wanted to go back to the beginning today, so it seems so appropriate to go back to the beginning before Donna's trial and look at some of the early reports. So I'm going to start with the Tallahassee Democrat. Evidence points to an earlier Markel murder attempt. Prosecutors say Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera were thwarted in an earlier attempt to execute Dan Markel in Tallahassee the month before he was finally slain. A Leon County judge delayed the decision to set a bond for 33-year-old Garcia Friday as his attorney looked to interview Tallahassee police investigators. Garcia pled not guilty to charges of first-degree murder in the July 2014 shooting of Markel, a Florida State law professor and prominent legal scholar. On July 18th, 2014, Markel was found slumped over the steering wheel of his car with 2 gunshot wounds to his head. Garcia was arrested May 25th in Broward County, then transported to Tallahassee a few weeks later. Court documents and other evidence point towards members of Markel's ex-wife's family, chiefly her mother and brother, Donna and Charlie Adelson, as enlisting Garcia and Rivera for murder-for-hire plot that ended in Markel's shooting. Police say 41-year-old Markel's killing was connected to the child visitation proceedings in the aftermath of his acrimonious divorce. The motive for Markel's murder, court documents say, stemmed from the desperate desire of the Adelson family that his ex-wife, Wendi Adelson, and the couple's 2 young sons be allowed to move to South Florida. In a Broward County jail call with his girlfriend, Catherine McBanawa, Garcia said he wanted to put the ordeal behind him, and once he was released, quote, get the hell out of Dodge, he said, and just put all this crap, my word not his, behind us, unquote. His South Florida attorney, Jim Lewis, argued that the state has only circumstantial evidence against Garcia, nothing concrete. However, he indicated that local attorney Zach Ward could possibly join the defense team to work during the sentencing phase. All they've got is theories, Lewis said, no facts, no eyewitnesses, no physical evidence, no confession, no statements. This man should not be held here without bail, unquote. The bond hearing would come before a judge as soon as Tuesday, when Lewis said he hopes to subpoena officers who investigated the case to ask how Garcia became a suspect and what witnesses prosecutors have who place him as being involved in a conspiracy with the Adelson family. I want to see some physical evidence linking my client to this horrible crime, he said. Garcia and Rivera drove from Miami in a rented Toyota Prius, police say, and stayed in Tallahassee for several days before shooting Markel. And so there's the famous photograph from, I believe, the toll booth or an ATM. Oh, this is the ATM, right? Were captured in an ATM footage in Miami the day Dan Markel was killed. Cell phone records show the men were in town and in the area around Markel's Benton Hills home the day of the shooting. Surveillance video captured the car driving on Thomasville Road in the moments before and after the midday shooting. Lewis said there was a good, legitimate reason why Garcia would be in Tallahassee for these days, and at the appropriate time, that's going to come out, unquote. Kappelman is seeking the death penalty. She asked that Garcia be kept behind bars or face a minimum bond of $1 million. She added that the prosecution must explain why Garcia should be held without bond, but that doesn't allow Lewis to shake down the entire case. If I fail, then the result and the remedy is to give a bond, not to be able to call witnesses and be able to examine my whole case, Kappelman said. She conceded that concrete physical evidence could not place Garcia as the shooter, but other evidence would prove otherwise. As far as I know, there's no DNA at the crime scene. I don't have a witness that will say I saw Mr. Garcia kill Mr. Markel, so Lewis is right in that extent, Kappelman said. But there is a mountain of other evidence that I think will be sufficient to reach my burden beyond a reasonable doubt at trial. Prosecutors released dozens of pages of investigative materials, which include crime scene and suspect photos, videos, cell phone records used to build their case against Garcia, Rivera, and others. The same grand jury that indicted Garcia and Rivera were retained to hear more on the slaying next month. More arrests are expected in the case, Kappelman said, called Banawa a suspect and possibly a witness in the case. According to court records, she was in a romantic relationship with Charlie Adelson and is the mother of 2 of Garcia's children. Lewis said Garcia had an acrimonious relationship with Charles Adelson, so to suggest he would kill for the South Florida periodontist was ludicrous. Garcia denied ever being in Tallahassee. Meanwhile, Rivera, who was questioned 3 days after Garcia's arrest, at first denied ever traveling to the capital city. However, Rivera, an inmate in a federal prison outside Orlando on unrelated charges, changed his story when police showed him a photo of the two men in the Prius. So I thought that was interesting. And hold on one second. So let me share this tab here. Suspect in Dan Markel case has a long rap sheet. Sigfredo Garcia was arrested for the first time in Florida on April 30th, 1997, just 3 days after his 15th birthday. Over the years that followed, he was arrested at least 21 more times, including on Wednesday when he was charged in connection with the killing of FSU law professor Dan Markel. But his arrest record hardly suggests he was a criminal mastermind. Many of his arrests were on misdemeanor charges, and he never spent so much as a day in a Florida prison. Garcia did spend time in county lockups in South Florida, though. Details were not immediately available. He was arrested several other times as a teenager in the Miami area on charges including assaulting an officer, breaking into cars, and making or attempting to make an explosive device. According to Florida Department of Law Enforcement records, charges were dropped in at least 2 of those cases. In 1999, when he was 17, Garcia was arrested for breaking into a car and prosecuted as an adult. He spent 6 months in jail, according to Fiddle records. As an adult, he was arrested on charges including trafficking in amphetamines, aggravated assault with a weapon, criminal mischief, and possession of other substances. You guys can guess what they are or read them on the screen. Several of these charges were dropped as well, records indicate. So he had a record, but what I thought was more interesting was his arraignment. So I thought we'd watch that together.
Tonight, in your spacious La Quinta suite, your eyes could use a break after a long day of seeing things. But hey.
Sigfredo Garcia.
Judge, at this time, I'm going to wait for him to come up first.
He declined the public defender.
I don't have anything on the possession of.
Good morning, Your
Is
Honor.
there a warrant, a probable cause affidavit?
One moment, Your Honor.
Because the only thing this says is the defendant was arrested by virtue of the above listed warrant.
No PC was submitted?
I don't have it.
No, I know, I'm sorry, I'm just asking to find if they have any, Garcia.
I've got the possession of cocaine, and then I've got the Allen County hold from Leon County, which is a no bond.
Is he represented by an attorney?
That's a murder charge.
Brian, can you ask if he's represented by an attorney up there?
I don't have anything on the possession of
But
cocaine.
I don't have his information. I need it in my property. It's in my wallet.
He does, but he needs access to his phone. If we could get an order to that effect.
Judge, will the court sign an order to allow him to have access to his property so he get his lawyer's number?
So he's trying to get his lawyer's number, which is in his phone, which was taken upon his arrest. He's trying to call his lawyer. There. Looks extremely tall, no?
Number and contact information.
His attorney for what? This case
The
And thank you, Bling is the New Black. I appreciate it. These super chats really help continue to allow me to live stream and keep the show going. I super appreciate it.
the Leon County case, he's represented by counsel, I believe.
And what's your attorney? He doesn't know his attorney's name?
Sir, do you know your attorney's name?
I just met him yesterday. I have that information inside my wallet, which is in my property bag.
Okay.
I apologize for that. I didn't know I needed a lawyer until yesterday.
You didn't know you had a warrant out?
Right. He didn't know he had a warrant. He didn't know he needed a lawyer, or he wasn't provided a lawyer until yesterday. First he says he needs his phone. Then he says he needs his wallet.
No, ma'am.
So would the court at least allow him access to his property so he could contact his
For
attorney?
that limited purpose.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, you can, yeah, they'll take care of it. She's gonna sign an order.
I'm still confused about this warrant. All it says is a search incident.
Yeah, they arrested on the warrant and then searched him to arrest the family.
He's confused about the warrant. So this is his arraignment, his first arraignment.
All right. Qualifying probable cause on count one as well. Bond amount is set at $1,000, and on the out of county hold, the court's already told there is no bond.
All right, then. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Cedric G. Pierre.
So that seems like, so it was just $1,000 initially to get him out. It's pretty interesting. Thanks, Nothing, for the super sticker. I appreciate it. Nothing. Thanks, Nothing. What a name. Clever. So it gets more. So I thought that was pretty interesting, his little arraignment. But it gets more interesting. Fancy Fiction just shared on her Twitter. So when Katie was arrested, she was just arrested, and she was allowed a phone call, and she called her lawyer. And immediately after the arrest, Isom gets a call from Charlie's attorney saying, why did you arrest my client? And then he gets a text message here from Tara Kawas. Good evening. As you know, this is Catherine's attorney, Tara Kawas. Let this text memorialize that she invokes her right to remain silent and to counsel. No one is to meet with her without me being present. She has been counseled on this issue. Will request the same and will say nothing else. I also counseled her on spontaneous statements, so that won't be happening either. Thank you for your understanding here and for letting her call me. There was no need to arrest her, though, as she would have surrendered had you asked. Based on her past behavior and lack of cooperation, we could not take the chance on her taking flight. This is Isom, and endangering others. We showed you and your client tremendous respect and went out of our way to allow her to call you for her children's benefit. So she said, like, can I make a call to my kids? And she called her lawyer. Isom goes on to say, we believe You did your client the disservice of ruining any opportunity she had left to proactively cooperating by notifying Charlie Adelson's attorney of her arrest. Are you working with Mr. Marcus on a combined strategy wherein you have some obligation to inform him of your client's actions? So isn't it interesting? I mean, I know every attorney wants their client to be quiet, but this seemed to be the tragedy of Katie's trial and retrial, in that had she just taken a deal, she was offered no time to take a deal, just to talk. And instead, she maintained her silence because Charlie's telling everyone, if everyone remains silent, we'll all be okay. And instead, Sigfredo Garcia is facing the death penalty. He's lucky he got life, and Katie got life. Charlie got life. All to protect Charlie and the Adelson family. And it'd be really interesting to hear in Donna's trial who was paying, if anything comes out about the Adelson family paying for her defense. I know that it was explored on a surface level at one point. Georgia Kappelman suspected that the Adelson family was paying for their defense, and Catherine McBanoa came up with some proof. This was in an in-camera meeting, which means that it's a not recorded meeting, secret meeting. We will know nothing about what was shown that was satisfactory to the judge, that proved that neither Sigfredo nor Catherine McBanoa's defense was being paid for. Detective, my obligations are to Katie and Katie only. We weren't the ones who leaked it to the media. The whole world found out about the arrest from the leak within a few hours of the arrest. Why would that story be leaked so quickly if you were interested in cooperation? And as for danger, we all know that she poses no danger or risk. What you've done here was done for the media. Please let me know when you can send me whatever is that gives a breakdown of the probable cause for arrest. Have a nice Sunday. Woo! So that didn't help her. Did not help her at all. I mean, she got such bad, such bad advice really coming from, I believe, the Adelson family, like I said. But let me see. Let me take a break, see what else I have up on I have so many things, up that I want to show you. I don't want to miss anything. I'll be back in 35 seconds. Don't go anywhere. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. Okay. We are back. So I just wanted to show you Katie's. I think these aren't really seldom looked at. This is from an article called Not Finished Yet. The Tallahassee Democrat is so great. It never goes behind a paywall. All these articles, Not Finished Yet, More Arrests Likely in Markell Case. And in this, we see Catherine McBanoa charged in the murder of FSU, law professor Dan Markell at her first appearance in Leon County Court on Tuesday morning. So here's her first We're going to have to skip through some ads. There's nothing I can do about that. I think this is one that's going to make us, I'm not going to fall for that big flashing. Okay, now we can skip it. Here we go.
Yes, what is your last name pronounced? Is it Kawas?
Kawas, yes, you got it right on point.
There you go, there you go. All right, I'm Judge Lane Smith in Leon County, Florida. Your client, Miss McBanwa, is present.
Good morning, Your Honor, and I appreciate you allowing me to appear by phone this morning.
Yes, ma'am. Now, will you be entering an appearance to defend Miss McBanwa?
Yes, I
She looks scared, doesn't she, Katie? She looks really frightened. When she was arrested, she was so emotional and frightened. She urinated on herself.
will, Your Honor, it hadn't been done before because a case number had not been officially generated yet.
All right, we do have a case number. That's 2016 CF 3036.
Okay.
All right, there is a probable cause affidavit and a warrant, a no bond warrant that was signed by Judge Jimmy Hankinson, who is the circuit judge assigned to the case. He indicated no bond on it. This is a charge of a first-degree murder capital felony case.
Right. Which should have been her first clue to cooperate. This is the actual charge. T. Cancella, thanks so much. Best Voice Award goes to Roberta. Also, Best Laugh. Oh, I'm so glad. Thanks for your excellent content. So glad I can make you laugh. They put you in the red and white stripes right away in Leon County. They're not fooling around.
So I'm not going to do anything that would change that. You may, at your option, ask for an author hearing later on. But what's going to happen for now is your client will be held without bond pending further order from the circuit court.
And Your Honor, just so I may have access to the record at this point, our objections at this point to pretrial detention would be under criminal procedure 3.131. In the event that the state hasn't at this point filed a motion for pretrial detention, I understand that the probable cause finding has already been made by a prior judge. However, based on the fact and under those rules, I believe that, it's a violation right now to hold her no bond because the state has failed to file a motion for pretrial detention under 3.131.
All right, and state, do you wish to reply?
Judge, I don't think that's required in capital offense. I will file that further down the road if needed, but I intend to be heard in front of Judge Hankinson and Arthur hearing is sought.
Yes, we're certainly not going to have an offer.
I believe that's the same jacket that Georgia wears in opening statements. We're going to look at that too in Sigfredo in Katie's trial. Looks very similar. Maybe that's her lucky jacket for this case.
Here today. All right, I'm in agreement that that is something that the state may file. You may seek an offer hearing, but I don't believe that the criminal rule of procedure requires that at this stage. I think the likelihood that it'll be forthcoming very short. All right, so I do want to make sure, ma'am, that you are able to get what you need to review so that when you have a chance to have a confidential conversation with your client, you're able to be prepared for that. All right, anything else?
I just so the court is aware, I will be filing later on today through the e-filing system. I know for the parents under the case number you provided.
Very good. Thank you, ma'am. All right.
Thank you so much, Judge. I really appreciate it.
Very good.
Good day.
Bye-bye.
I will be filing something totally ineffective that will help my client not one bit. That's what Tara K. was. It's basically saying. I'll be doing a lot of work that I can bill out the Adelson family for, in my opinion. That won't help my client a bit, but will enrich my pockets.
All right, ma'am, the only safe course for you to do.
And give my client a lot of false hope. Here's the judge telling Katie what she can do. Hold on, let me go back a little bit.
Only safe course for you to do is to have conversation only with your attorney's firm in confidence, where it's confidential. So, otherwise, it'd be best to keep your thoughts to yourself regarding this charge. Good luck to you.
Again, the message to Katie is keep your mouth shut. Don't talk. Don't make a deal. You can kind of see how this happened now. All this pressure. The judge is telling her not to talk. Her lawyer is telling her not to talk. Any communication she gets via her lawyer or through her lawyer or via Charlie or Charlie's lawyer attorney is all telling her to stay quiet and everything will be okay. Trust her lawyer. Terrible, terrible advice. Should have listened to Isom. Sure, she thinks that now. And I believe she's still not telling everything that she knows in this. Sanny from the H Animals, clearly mutualism relationship. Idiot rich people and idiot broke people collide. This is the outcome. I wonder if Dan deeply knew she was capable. Interesting question or comment. Did Dan know Wendi? Certainly Jeffrey Lacasse caught on to Wendy's psychopathy, but there is some hints, and it's on my Patreon. I did an episode on Wendy's. There are some hints of what Dan Markel knew about Wendi, where he said that he was the only one who knew what a bad person she was. So she used that to say, well, you know, my fake public persona is so empathetic and great. See, I work with trafficked women. I have all these friends. I'm so well liked, but only you. And he says, only I know what a bad person you are. And for people to go, oh, you're not a bad person. Oh, that Dan Markel must have been so awful, right? Because you always plays the victim. So that does hint that he did know. That at some point, and the really more interesting question is, when did he catch wind of this, of the real Wendi Adelson? I won't even call it her dark side, the real Wendi Adelson. Was this after the divorce, before the divorce? How she chose to divorce him, leaving the divorce papers and taking the kids and not telling him. He didn't even know where his kids were or his wife was. Was that, or was it before then? When do you wake up and see you're married to a monster? Pretty interesting. Or is it during the divorce when they're arguing over tennis rackets and other things, when she clears out the bank account or half of the bank account and the furniture? I mean, and takes a ring that doesn't belong to her, that belongs to Dan's family, that's the Holocaust diamond. Is that it? Is that when he found out? Let me know what you guys think. So there's Sigfredo's probable cause record. This is also going to read a little of it, and then we can watch the opening statements. Hold on one sec. The link, you can read it yourself. The link is in the description of this episode. So the first appearance magistrate, Sigfredo Garcia, summary of offenses and probable cause affidavit. That this affidavit sets forth probable cause to believe that Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera murdered Florida State, University law professor Dan Markel in violation of Florida statute. On Friday, July 18, 2014, at 11:02 a.m., a report of a shooting was received at the home of Florida State University law professor Daniel Markel, 2116 Trescott Drive, Tallahassee, Florida. Upon arrival, Tallahassee Police Department officers found Markel slumped over in the driver's seat of his vehicle from apparent gunshot to the head. Markel was transported from the scene to a local hospital where he later died from the injuries sustained during the shooting. The investigation of the crime scene found no indication that this incident was part of any other criminal intent, such as burglary or robbery. At the time of the shooting, Markel was talking to an individual on his cellular telephone. The person stated Markel interrupted their conversation, saying someone he did not recognize was in his driveway. The person on the telephone with Markel then heard what sounded like a loud grunt. He heard a muffled conversation in the background, but could not make out words being spoken. He then heard labored breathing, but could not get Markel to respond. Initial investigation at the scene revealed that a neighbor heard what he believed to be a gunshot and looked out the window where a small silver or light-colored vehicle resembling a Prius was observed backing out of the victim's driveway. Motive for murder. Investigators obtained information from sources that Markel had gone through a bitter divorce with Wendi Adelson, who was also a professor at Florida State University Law School. Wendi filed for divorce on Monday, September 10th, 2012. Markel reportedly returned home from a business trip to find his family gone, a majority of the contents of the house missing, and the paperwork for dissolution of marriage displayed on his bed. He eventually learned Wendi and their 2 children had moved to her parents' house in Coral Springs, Florida. Reportedly, Markel protested and Wendi returned to Leon County with the children until legal arguments could be heard. On June 20th, 2013, Leon County Circuit Judge Hobbs formally denied with prejudice Wendi's motion for relocation with the children. Court documents show the divorce was resolved without trial by a marital settlement agreement and granted by Judge Hobbs on July 31st, 2013. Email evidence indicates Wendi's parents, especially her mother, wanted Wendi to coerce Markel into allowing the relocation to South Florida. Additionally, Wendi's brother, Charlie Adelson, reportedly did not like Markel and did not get along with him. On February 14th, 2014, Markel filed a counter motion to enforce the marital agreement provision and motion for sanctions. Markel claimed Wendi and her attorney had not been forthcoming in the marital settlement agreement regarding her financial assets. Hold on one second, guys. Be right with you. One of these things that's like one of these crazy things that My phone's going off. Hold on one second. Okay, here we are. Thank you for your patience. On February 14th, okay, so he filed a counter motion to enforce, and he was asking for sanctions. So that means some kind of punishment for Wendi. On March 26, 2014, Markel filed a counter motion for enforcement of the MSA on parenting issues and motion for contempt and sanctions again. So that's my word again, not theirs. One of the points of contention in the motion was Wendi's mother, Donna Adelson, and her reported negative interaction with the children. Markel claimed Donna made disparaging remarks about him to his sons. Markel sought relief in this motion by asking the court to prohibit Donna from having unsupervised time with her grandchildren and to impose limitations to prevent the children from being subjected to disparaging comments about their father. These motions were scheduled for a court hearing on May 15, 2014. Hold on one sec. However, due to substitutions of counsel, the hearing was continued. A new court hearing date had not yet been scheduled prior to Markel's death. Investigators believe motive for this murder stemmed from the desperate desire of the Adelson family to relocate Wendi and the children to South Florida, along with a pending court hearing that might have impacted their access to the grandchildren. The suspect's vehicle. This investigation has revealed that Markel left his home the morning of July 18th, 2014, and drove his two young children to their daycare facility on the west side of Tallahassee, approximately 5 miles away, dropping them off at 8:50 a.m. Markel then drove to the Premier Health and Fitness. At approximately 9:12, Markel arrived at Premier, where surveillance video shows a silver or light green Toyota Prius entering the parking lot after Markel parked his car. After Markel went to the health club, the video captured the Prius in the parking lot where the driver moved the vehicle to different parking positions while Markel was in the building. Markel left Premier at approximately 10:38 a.m. and drove off in his vehicle towards Thomasville Road. The video shows the Prius exiting the parking lot and following the direction of Markel's car. Additional video was discovered for the day of the homicide on the Star Metro City bus camera system. Video was captured from two different buses, one southbound on captured images of what appears to be the same Prius before and after the homicide was committed. Unfortunately, images could not provide the license plate characters of the Prius. After analyzing all of the surveillance videos, investigators believe the suspect's vehicle to be a 2006 to 2009 Toyota Prius with silver pine Mecca paint, which appears to be a light green silver color. The Prius appears to have tinted windows, a sun pass transponder on the top center of the windshield, a missing low hook cover on the front bumper, and a back passenger side mirror casing. Investigators analyzed the timestamps from the bus camera videos when the Toyota Prius was observed, which confirmed that the Prius had the opportunity to be present at the crime scene when the murder was committed. Additional surveillance video was obtained from a bank, a county government facility, and a store along Markel's route the morning of July 18th, which shows a familiar vehicle trailing Markel's car. Investigators believe the suspects in the Prius followed the victim throughout the morning and back to his residence, where the victim was shot in the head as he sat in his car. Investigation after the homicide was reported in the press. A resident of the Ashford Club Apartments, 2055 Thomasville Road, reported seeing two men park a bluish silver Prius type car in the southeast corner of the complex parking lot around mid-morning on one of the weekdays immediately before the July 18th, 2014 homicide. The men got out of the vehicle, walked down a park path behind the apartment complex that parallels a large storm drainage ditch. This ditch is at the fenced rear property of the Markel's home at Trescott Drive. The resident describes the driver as a white male, tall and slender, with a runner's build, fair complexion, wearing a light-colored ball cap. The passenger was described as a shorter man with a stocky build and dark hair with a darker complexion, resembling Italian or Spanish descent. When the two men returned to the car about 10 minutes later, the passenger was carrying an unknown black object in one hand. He was completely wet, as if he fell into the drainage ditch. The passenger's pants appeared wet up to the knees. Sigfredo Garcia and Luis Rivera are similar to the physical descriptions given by the Ashford Club Apartments resident. Garcia is taller and slender, and Rivera is shorter and stockier with a darker complexion, as set forth below. Evidence establishes that they were in Tallahassee on the day of the murder and that they had rented a silver pine mica Toyota Prius for the trip from South Florida. Both Garcia and Rivera are convicted felons in the state of Florida. Connection to Garcia, investigators developed information that around the time of the murder, Charlie, Wendy's brother, was involved in a personal relationship with Catherine McBanawa. McBanawa, whose cellular telephone number was BLAP, call records show McBanawa as one of Charlie's top contacts. Online public database research revealed that this number was utilized by Catherine McBanawa. Further investigation also revealed that Sigfredo Garcia is the father of McBanawa's two minor children, both with this last name Garcia. McBanawa is also listed as the vice president of Southern Garcia Solutions, Inc., and Garcia is listed as the president of the company on state Florida records for corporations, excuse me. So I wonder who helped them put that together. Doesn't that sound like Charlie? But who knows? Wonder when that was incorporated. Cellular telephone information linking Garcia and Rivera to the murder Cellular telephone analysis conducted during this investigation has revealed that on July 18th, 2014, at approximately 9:36 on the day of the homicide, cellular telephone number BLAP was in the vicinity of Premier in Tallahassee, where the victim was last seen alive. An investigation of telephone number revealed that it was McBanawa's telephone number, that it was being used by Garcia, prior to the murder, and had been in contact with McBanawa's telephone number approximately 2,700 times between May 1st and July 19th, 2014, when Garcia's cellular phone number ceased activity the day after the homicide. Talk about a flurry of communication, right? Cellular telephone analysis revealed phone number BLAP, which is one of Garcia's frequent contacts, was also in the vicinity of the Markel residence twice before the homicide on July 17th. Investigation shows this phone number was being used by Luis Rivera during the time of Markel's murder. Information obtained for the provider, Rivera, is consistent with Rivera's handset traveling from North Miami to Tallahassee at a time consistent with having committed the murder and immediately leading back to North Miami after the homicide. So they followed their telephone all the way from Miami to Tallahassee and back again. Pretty intense investigation. Information obtained from the cellular service provided for Rivera's phone and Garcia's phone revealed that they traveled from North Miami, Florida on the afternoon of July 16th and traveled in Tallahassee, Florida just after midnight on July 17, 2014. A receipt from a motel on West Tennessee Street in Tallahassee shows that Rivera checked in approximately at 1 a.m. on July 17, 2014, which is consistent with the cellular location data. Both Garcia and Rivera's phones, which are in the area of the victim's residence during the day of July 17, 2014. Prius linked to Garcia and Rivera, so they were spotted at the Alligator Alley tolls booth on the two relevant times. On July 16th, the transponder registered the toll plaza in Broward County, and the transponder registered their car going eastbound. Okay, I'm going to take a quick break. This is a lot of reading. I will be right back. Don't go anywhere. If you are enjoying this episode of my True Crime Report, please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and share this episode. Get access to exclusive podcasts and other bonus content by becoming a patron today. If you have a question or comment for me, shoot me a super chat and I'll do my best to answer it and read it on air. Thanks so much. Now back to the show. In, we're going over Sigfredo Garcia's probable cause affidavit. Garcia was convicted of the murder of being the shooter in the murder for hire of Dan Markel, Luis Rivera, his what would you call it, accomplice, took a plea deal and is serving his sentence concurrently with this sentence. He was already convicted of. So the witness, Charlie Adelson, was also convicted in this, and his mother, Donna Adelson, of being a co-conspirator, being basically paying for the murder for hire and arranging it. And his mother, Donna, is going on trial next month. So that's where we're at. So on page 5, Tallahassee witness. A witness whose identity is known to law enforcement affiant previously met Garcia and Rivera in Tallahassee a month or more before the homicide. This is Shodrick. The witness, remember Shodrick? The witness cellular phone was contacted by Rivera's cellular phone on the afternoon of July 17, 2014. The witness was asked and agreed to rent a motel room on North Monroe Street in the witness's name for Garcia and Rivera on the night of July 17th, 2014. This is consistent with the cellular location data and receipt obtained from the motel showing a room registered in the witness's name. The witness was able to positively identify both Garcia and Rivera individually in 2 separate photographic lineups. The witnesses recalled Rivera having in his possession a silver finished short barrel revolver handgun the first time he met Garcia and Rivera, possibly in June 2014, at the motel on West Tennessee Street. Recovered evidence from the scene indicate the caliber of firearm used in this murder is consistent with revolver ammunition, and no spent casings was found at the scene. The investigation did not reveal any other legitimate purpose for either suspect to be in Tallahassee at the time of the murder. So the cellular data for July 18, 2014, on the morning of, both show Garcia and Rivera's cellular phones were in the area of Premier during the time when the victim was inside, and surveillance video shows the Toyota Prius in the parking lot. Garcia's telephone ceased activity just before 10 a.m. while in the area of Premier, with the last text messages covering at 9:58 a.m. The next event on Garcia's telephone was text messages and or notifications being received at 12:29 p.m., consistent with the handset being powered up. Immediately afterwards, at 12:30 p.m., Garcia placed a call to Magbanawa, which was the first contact initiated by Garcia after the homicide. This call occurred when Garcia's phone was in the area of Lake City, Florida, on or near I-75, approximately 1.5 hours after the shooting was reported. Investigators believe Garcia and Rivera turned their phones off before 10 a.m., committed the murder of Markel at his home on Trescott Drive, and then fled back to North Miami, Florida on I-10 and I-75. Rivera's ATM transaction. Analysis of Rivera's checking account revealed an ATM transaction took place on July. I mean, they have them 50 different ways. So they have him at they have him on camera at the ATM. There's no previous contact between Markel and these 2 defendants. Therefore, it is in the affiant's belief Garcia and Rivera were enlisted to commit this egregious act against someone they did not know and have never interacted with before the murder. On May 24, 2016, investigators conducted an interview with Garcia. During the interview, Garcia denied ever being in Tallahassee. He stated that he had never made any trips with Rivera. Garcia denied any knowledge of the homicide. See, he's keeping his mouth shut too. He doesn't know anything. Someone who just looks a lot like him in that picture, right at the bank. The proceeding is, best to my knowledge, signed off by the judge. So there you go. All right. So taking a look, let's start from the beginning, shall we? In Dan Markel's case, this is the first trial. Whoop, hold on one second. Okay.
The evidence.
And this is Georgia Kappelman's opening statement. She's in her, looks like the same jacket that she was at the arraignment of Katie McBanoa. And this is her first opening statement in the case. Sigfredo and Catherine McBanoa were being tried together. Only time they've done that. Only in last time they tried co-conspirators together. In this case, probably because Katie McBanoa had a hung jury.
Will show that at 11 a.m. on July 18th, 2014, Jim Geiger is with his wife and grandchildren at his home on Trescott Drive when he hears a noise that sounds like a gunshot. He goes to a large bay window at the front of his residence and looks outside toward his neighbor's house. And he observes what appears to be a light-colored Prius or Prius-type vehicle back quickly out of his neighbor's driveway and take off toward Benton Road. Concerned, Mr. Geiger walks out his front door and walks in the direction of his neighbor's residence. His neighbor is Dan Markel. Seeing that Mr. Markel's vehicle is running in the garage, he's thinking, well, maybe Mr. Markel's about to back out. So he kind of goes back to his house, but he kind of keeps an eye on the driveway. When Mr. Markel does not back out after a couple moments, Mr. Geiger goes over to do some further investigation. And that is when he sees a terrible sight. His neighbor, Dan Markel, behind the wheel with a terrible wound to his head. There is shattered glass.
Right. And I know that some of you have a theory that Wendi was the reason she drove by Trescott, was she was the one who was supposed to discover Dan as she took her shortcut. But I would have thought if that were the case, she would have gotten out of the car and at least tried to enact the plan. And it sounds like Donna and Charlie are angry at Wendi. Of course. Does anybody remember this from Donna's notes? Hold on. She kept this crazy. Let me see if this is the one. Right. If she's involved and C's involved, right? Meaning if Wendy's involved, then Charlie's involved. Like that, he's complaining to his mother. Well, of course the jury's going to think if Wendy's involved, that wasn't just a shortcut, then Charlie's involved. And if Katie's involved, then I'm involved, right? It's all connected. It all makes sense. Yeah, it all makes sense perfectly. That's what circumstantial evidence is all about, what makes it so hard to undo.
Everywhere. Mr. Markel is seated in the driver's seat. He's alive, he's moving, he's still groaning, but he's not able to talk. He's not responsive, and he's obviously in distress. Mr. Geiger, seeing this, runs home for his phone and calls 911. That call came in at 11:01 a.m. in broad daylight. First responders arrived to find 41-year-old Dan Markel unresponsive. He's taken to the hospital where he survives for some time, I think about 14 hours before he is officially pronounced deceased. Dan Markel, father of 2 young boys and highly respected attorney at law and professor at the Florida State University College of Law, was shot twice in the head in his own garage in broad daylight. Who would do such a thing? Nothing seems to be missing from the crime scene. There's no sign of a forced entry or a robbery attempt. How do you begin to investigate a case like this? What clues did the killers leave behind? Well, thanks to our 911 caller, we know that the suspect vehicle is a light-colored Prius. And there's a second 911 call as well. You'll learn that Mr. Markel was on the phone at the time he was murdered, and the person that he was on the phone with heard Markel say, "Hold on a moment, there's someone in my driveway I don't recognize." Then the line went dead and the man was unable to reach Mr. Markel again, so he called 911. So we learned from that the person that murdered Mr. Markel was a stranger to him. It was someone he did not recognize. An inquiry into Dan Markel's movements that morning revealed that he dropped his 2 young sons off at daycare at about 8:50 a.m., then went to work out at Premier Gym, and then was killed shortly upon his return home from the gym. Law enforcement obtained surveillance from the gym and later surveillance from a city bus. So there are cameras mounted to city buses, and they got surveillance from the city buses along the route that they think this Prius might have traveled along the route.
So George is not going to reinvent the wheel here. This is so much the probable cause affidavit from Sigfredo's arrest. And she knows it tells a minus the detail of the unknown men going behind the house and pulling something, coming out wet and pulling out something with a black bag. I always wonder about that. I know that it's been debunked. At least I heard Fancy Fiction say that they had the wrong date. It's just so curious and interesting. The witness had the wrong date, which I would think would be worked out before it went in the probable cause affidavit, but okay. But it's just one of those mysterious things in this case. But she's just following a lot. She knows that the probable cause affidavit tells the story very nicely, and she's going to start at the beginning and how law enforcement unraveled this case and got to Sigfredo and how. So
That they think Mr. Markel would have traveled between the gym and his residence. And they discover something ominous on the surveillance footage. A light-colored Prius, which they deduced from this surveillance was silver pine mica, that's the exact color, which appears to follow Dan Markel into the gym parking lot at 9:11 a.m. on the morning of his death. The Prius waits in the parking lot for Mr. Markel to work out, which is approximately an hour. And then the Prius follows Mr. Markel out of the parking lot at about 10:38 a.m. The Prius was also observed on a surveillance camera from the city bus, which narrows the time of Mr. Markel's death even further, because we see that Prius on a bus both before, minutes before, and then moments after the murder as well, fleeing at a high rate of speed north on Thomasville Road towards the interstate. And you will observe these surveillance videos and learn a few things from these images that were captured about our suspect vehicle. You'll learn the exact color of the Prius, silver pine mica, the approximate year of the vehicle, the fact that the vehicle had a black aftermarket side mirror attached to it, a missing tow hook cover, which is just a little round circle on the front bumper of the vehicle, and a SunPass transponder mounted to the front of the windshield. Also, in one of the images from the city bus captured after the murder, you will see the presence of what appears to be a driver in a dark colored shirt and a passenger in a light colored shirt. That becomes important because later, when we have 2 suspects develop, we find an ATM video that shows in Pembroke Pines, Florida, on the same day of the murder, a silver pine mica Prius at an ATM with our 2 suspects pictured inside, and you'll see those images as well. So meanwhile, law enforcement's gathering these surveillance images, trying to get information about the suspects and the vehicle that might be involved in this murder. While they're doing that, they're simultaneously trying to learn more about Dan Markel's life, who is close to him, who might have a motive to want him dead. Law enforcement.
Who might have a motive? Maybe the Adelson family, perhaps. They're trying to figure out who's connected to this, who might be wanting Dan Markel off the planet. And they find these crazy emails by Donna saying, get to him emotionally, get to him psychologically, take control, dress up the kids in Nazi uniforms. I thought that might be a little hint.
Meets with Markel's ex-wife, Wendi Adelson, whereby they learn that she has been embroiled in a very contentious divorce and continued litigation with Mr. Markel regarding the enforcement of the divorce settlement agreement and specifically the custody of their two boys. Pleadings from the divorce indicate that Wendi Adelson had made efforts to relocate to South Florida. She'd actually moved to South Florida with the kids, and a court ordered her on June 20th, 2013, that she had to come back to Tallahassee. She couldn't leave with Mr. Markel's children. Emails between Wendi Adelson and her mother, Donna Adelson, that occur around the time of this litigation.
It's so telling, though, right? That act is so telling. I'll just take half of my stuff and go where I want to go. And Dan Markel being a lawyer, used the courts to get her back. But, you know, it's just so telling about who Wendi is as a person. I'll take the boys and go where I want to go. I don't want to be here anymore. I'll just leave.
About 1 year before.
I don't need to tell him. I'll just take my stuff and go, right? I don't need to tell him.
For the murder, indicate that Donna Adelson despised Dan Markel and was desperate to find a way for Wendi and these two kids to move down to where she was located in South Florida. Donna Adelson in these emails refers to Dan Markel as a religious zealot, a bastard. She says, let's show this F blank, 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 what will make him absolutely miserable, and proposes a plan of action for how to threaten and or bully and or bribe Dan Markel into allowing Wendi to move to South Florida with the children.
But I mean, that says so much about how the Adelson family works and their mind works. I'm going to do the divorce in the most hurtful way possible. When you're out of town giving a lecture in New York, I'll just put the divorce papers on the bed, take the furniture, not tell you where I'm at. You won't know where your own children are at. And tough, like in the most punishing, so bullying way. And that was the thing about the kosher food at the wedding. So if I gave the impression, I just got an email about kosher style food. If I got the impression, gave the impression that it's just hot dogs, but that's where it can mean any traditionally Jewish food that you may find at a kosher deli, but that is not traditionally kosher. But I doubt that Wendi was serving at her fancy wedding pastrami sandwiches. It just sounds like they took one look at the food and knew it wasn't kosher, meaning it was seafood or milk and meat mixed. It didn't seem like they had to ask around if it was kosher. And I doubt that she would be having, say, like borscht and potato pancakes or any kind of the things you find. I'm getting hungry thinking about it. Pastrami on rye, half sour pickles, those kind of things. Things you get at Katz's Deli.
These plans included converting the children to Catholicism, even though the entire family was Jewish. All the Adelsons were Jewish as well. But this suggestion was a way to gain leverage against Mr. Markel because Dan Markel was very observant in his faith, and it was very important to him that his children be raised in an environment that observed and was committed to the Jewish faith. The divorce between Wendi and Dan Markel was final back on July 31st of 2013, but as I mentioned, the litigation continued as both sides filed pleadings back and forth in reference to alleged violations of the divorce agreement, in reference to child custody, and specifically one of the last pleadings filed prior to Dan Markel's murder is in reference to Wendi Adelson's mother, his mother-in-law, Donna Adelson. And in this pleading, he alleged that the children's grandmother, Donna Adelson, was disparaging him to the kids. And he was petitioning the court to order that Donna Adelson not be allowed to have unsupervised contact with his children, her grandchildren. A ruling was never made on that motion because Dan Markel was murdered before the hearing was conducted. Wendi Adelson was interviewed, as I mentioned, and she will tell you that she sure hopes someone didn't do this on her behalf. She will tell you that her brother, Charlie Adelson, who also lives in South Florida.
Right. I hope nobody did this for me. I hope nobody did this as a present for me, thinking that this was a good thing. What if someone thought it was a good thing? Remember, Wendi? Someone thought that they were really doing a good thing. I mean, who would even phrase it that way? Doing something good.
With her mother, not with, but in the...
Not someone thought that they could eliminate my problem. I mean, that's not very flattering either, but yeah, I mean, I think it's telling into Wendi and Don, and even Donna's mind somewhat, that she would phrase it that way, that this would be a good thing because it's good for Wendi. So it's a good thing. It's good for Donna. It's a good thing. The entitlement of this family is crazy.
Same area as her mother, Donna Adelson, and her father, Harvey Adelson. She'll tell you that Charlie, quote, looked into hiring a hitman, but decided buying her a TV as a divorce present would be cheaper. And what was her alibi for the murder? Where was she when Dan Markel was killed? She has a witness who was present at her home, a repairman who was fixing that very TV, an appointment that was set up by her mother, Donna Adelson. So Wendi's brother, Charlie Adelson, has made references to hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel, and now hitmen have murdered Dan Markel. Meanwhile, law enforcement is still putting together more information about the Prius and the killers. They have gotten a search warrant for all the phone numbers that interacted with the cell tower, consistent with people being in the area of Premier Gym at the time that we know they were there. So literally every cell phone that interacted with those towers during that hour period of time. And they cross-referenced all of that data with Mr. Markel and his in-laws. So basically have any of the phone numbers that appear on that tower around the time that we know the suspects were at the gym been in contact recently with Dan Markel or with his in-laws or with his ex-wife. The purpose of that was to try to see if there was any link there. And combing through all this data and putting it all together was a very tedious task, but they did find one number with a South Florida exchange, which was present both in the area of Premier Gym at the time that the killers were there, and was linked to a single phone call on July 1st, 2014, so about 17 days before the murder. This number that was at Premier Gym from South Florida contacted Harvey Adelson, so the father-in-law of the deceased, husband of Donna Adelson, father of Wendi Adelson. And that number that contacted Harvey Adelson and that was also present.
Look how much Wendi is being brought up in this opening statement. Georgia knows. I mean, she was given limited, immunity meaning they can't use anything that she testified to, or they can't use it as a springboarding to investigate anything that she testified to in these trials to indict her in this. But look how Georgia Kappelman sees Donna and Wendi and Charlie, the Adelson family. Harvey is not mentioned too often as the core of this case.
At the gym on our date in question belonged to Sigfredo Garcia, the defendant in this case, aka Tuto, Tuto. And an examination of Garcia's call logs showed a frequent contact with another number, which also was present on our what we're calling tower dumps. So all those numbers that interacted with that cell phone tower at Premier at that time. Another number, no connection with the Adelsons that we found, but a frequent caller of Sigfredo Garcia is Luis Rivera. That phone number was also present at Premier at the time that our suspect vehicle was there. Luis Rivera's AKA is Tato. So we've got Tuto and Tato. So why would these two guys, Tuto and Tato, with no apparent ties to Tallahassee, be all the way up here from Miami, hanging around the gym at the same time that our suspect Prius was there? Possibly because they're our suspects. They're the ones inside the Prius. So now that we have these suspect phone numbers, we subpoena all the location information from the cell phone providers to show information about Rivera and Garcia's phones. Where were they during the time leading up to the homicide and after the homicide?
So we've got these two guys, Tuto and Tato. I mean, doesn't it sound like a children's book? Tuto and Tato's Big Adventure in Tallahassee. I mean, it's so dark, but yeah. I wonder how they got those nicknames.
And at the time of the homicide. And what it shows, which you'll get detailed testimony about in the form of digital evidence, is that Rivera and Garcia's phones leave Miami on July 16th, 2014. You'll see their movements up from Miami to Tallahassee. You'll see their movements around Tallahassee, including being in the area of Premier Gym. And then you'll see that both phones are consistent with having been turned off around the time that the Prius was at Premier Gym waiting for Dan Markell to come out. And both phones remain inactive until about an hour after the murder, where they pop back up, headed southbound on the interstate toward Miami. As a result of this evidence, Luis Rivera and Sigfredo Garcia were charged with first-degree murder of Dan Markell. The police work that has just taken me a few minutes to summarize took about 2 years to accomplish. By the time Rivera and Garcia were arrested for this murder, Rivera was in custody on an unrelated federal racketeering charge, which concerned Rivera's affiliation with a criminal street gang.
See, that's what I don't understand, is how these were tight for so long, these two, Rivera and Garcia. And how did Rivera join and really move up high in the Latin Kings, and Garcia, was he not involved at all, or did he just not have any rank? But it's never been mentioned that I've heard that he was connected with this gang. How can you have two friends? One's really involved in a gang and one's not, and they're spending every day together. But according to Luis Rivera, it's a family. Yeah, a family like the Corleone family. That's what he testified to. It's a family. He would get upset when they said it was a gang. He's testifying.
So when we developed these suspects, Rivera's in custody on something else. Ultimately, the state made a deal with Rivera to tell the truth in exchange for a plea to second-degree murder and a 19-year prison sentence to run concurrent or at the same time as his federal sentence. Rivera will tell you that he was hired by his lifelong friend, Sigfredo Garcia, who was hired by his longtime girlfriend and children's mother, Catherine Magbanowa, aka Katie, to come to Tallahassee and to kill Dan Markel. Magbanowa had an on-again, off-again relationship with Mr. Garcia, and during one of the off-again periods, you will learn prior to the murder, during one of these off-again periods with Mr. Garcia, she was seeing somebody else, a wealthy dentist by the name of Charlie Adelson. Charlie Adelson had a sister in Tallahassee, Wendi Adelson, and Wendi Adelson had a problem, and her problem was named Dan Markel. And the solution to that problem was Magbanowa, Rivera, and Garcia. Garcia told Rivera that Catherine Magbanowa had gotten them a job, and it was a big one. It was going to pay a lot of money. The job was in Tallahassee. Rivera and Garcia made, you'll learn, not one, but 2 trips to Tallahassee. The first trip was about 6 weeks prior to Markel's death, and it was intended to be a murder trip, but it ended up being more of a scouting trip. The murder did not occur. Garcia told Rivera on the way to Tallahassee on that first trip that they were coming up here to do a murder. Garcia showed Mr. Rivera a photograph of who they were coming to kill. He had a piece of paper with a picture of Dan Markel on it and some typed words underneath. He indicated to Rivera that they needed to kill this guy so that his wife could get their kids, and that they were going to be paid $100,000 for the job, with Rivera's cut being
Right. But they would not know Dan's schedule without Wendi. Very damning evidence against Wendi there. Donna could not have known that. Charlie could not have known that. This could not have been done as something good for Wendi because nobody knew Dan's schedule. They wouldn't have known he was at the gym. They wouldn't have known where to case him and follow him home from.
$35,000. Rivera bought a gun off the street, and Garcia rented a car for this June trip. Rivera asked Garcia, and this is the first trip, Rivera asked Garcia who knew that he was going along, who knew he was involved. And Garcia assured him that only Katie knew, Catherine Magbanowa. On the way, Garcia showed Rivera the piece of paper, and Rivera also overheard several phone calls between Garcia and Magbanowa during this first trip, which included Magbanowa instructing Garcia about what they needed to do, including things like, make sure you do everything right. Don't do anything stupid. When you are done, call me. Garcia and Rivera got a hotel room here in Tallahassee on this first trip. They did some scouting around the Markel residence, but couldn't get the job done and ultimately headed back to Miami. 6 weeks later, the two returned to Tallahassee in the green Prius rented by Luis Rivera in Miami, Florida. They brought the same gun that was present on the first trip, the one that Luis Rivera bought off the street, and that ultimately becomes the murder weapon. On this trip, they spend 2 nights in Tallahassee, again, scouting around the Markel residence, attempting to follow Mr. Markel. And you'll hear, Catherine Magbanowa previously instructed them not to do anything stupid. And her reasoning for that will be evidenced by some of the activity that they get up to when they're here. For example, Garcia accidentally shot a hole in the floorboard on the passenger side of the Prius with murder.
Right. Like Tudo and Tato were a little bit like the Three Stooges or the Two Stooges shooting a hole in the car on their way, putting an owl up on their social media. They thought enough to turn off their cell phones, which coincidentally Amanda Knox did with her boyfriend, first and only time that they did that together before the murder, turned it on right after, just like Sigfredo and Luis. But she's like, don't get into anything stupid. Good advice. They didn't take it, though.
Murder weapon prior to the murder, which resulted in them severing the gas line and rendering the vehicle inoperable. Then they had to get a ride to the store to buy some supplies to fix the thing and fix the thing on the side of the road. So you'll hear a little bit about that. Then the night before the murder, Rivera will tell you that he took a picture of an owl and posted it on Instagram, which, as y'all may know, indicates where you are when you post something. And he'll tell you that Catherine Magbanua immediately called Garcia to tell Rivera how stupid he was and to take the picture down because nobody could know where he was. Again, Rivera overhears conversation during the second trip between Garcia and Magbanua. Catherine Magbanua indicates that they have to get this job done because the professor is planning to leave town in the near future. So on July 18th, 2014, Rivera and Garcia follow Professor Markel to the daycare where he drops off his kids at approximately 8:50 in the morning. Then they go to the gym where they wait in the parking lot while Mr. Markel.
Right. And they also bought postcards and started writing all their fellow Latin kings saying greetings from Tallahassee. We're just doing a murder and some robbing down here. See you when we get back down to Miami. Like, so silly. Had to put up an owl picture.
All works out. And then they go to his home where Rivera pulls the Prius into the driveway close up to the bumper of Mr. Markel where he's parked in his driveway. You'll hear that Garcia gets out and approaches Markel with the revolver purchased on the street by Luis Rivera, and that that Garcia shoots Mr. Markel twice through the driver's window before hopping back into the Prius. Rivera backs out of the driveway and they head back to Miami. I mentioned earlier that both men had their phones off and that once they turn their phones back on, the very first call that either of them make after the homicide is Mr. Garcia to Catherine Magbanua. And what does he say? He says, the job is done. And what does she reply? She says, I know. There's a brief discussion about when they'll get their money. And Catherine Magbanua says, don't worry about the money. I will get the money. You'll get it tomorrow. Then the next day, Rivera was at the barber shop when he talked to Catherine Magbanua. She advised that she had the money and was looking for Garcia to pay up, but wasn't able to find Garcia. Rivera knew where to look for Garcia at another young lady's residence. Rivera successfully rounds up Garcia and they all meet at Rivera's house where Rivera gets his payment. So Rivera, Garcia, and Magbanua are all present. Rivera gets his money, $35,000, stapled into packs of $1,000 apiece. Garcia also gave Rivera a little extra money later that night while they're out celebrating. In the weeks and months after the homicide, Rivera and Garcia they each bought a motorcycle.
I mean, a motorcycle for ruining your life and sentencing Dan Markel's family and friends to a life sentence of grief for a motorcycle and a night out. You know, this case, I always think of the end of Fargo, just for a little bit of money. All this for a little bit of money. Tape vault around a banana bread for the chat. Okay, thank you.
Garcia also bought a car. Catherine Magbanua also got a car, a black Lexus, whose previous owner happens to be Harvey Adelson. Magbanua was also put on the payroll at the Adelson's dental practice shortly after the homicide and began receiving regular checks for approximately 2 years, although law enforcement has yet to determine what, if anything, what if any service she provides to that dental office. And the folks that work there don't seem to know either. She got a breast augmentation surgery shortly after the homicide. She had trips paid for by Charlie Adelson after the homicide that didn't even include him. And she deposited large amounts of cash into her bank account around the time of the murder, sometime.
Well, she had one breast, courtesy of Charlie Adelson, according to McManoa. She didn't get the full job, but she also got cruises for her and her mother. McManoa really, for doing very little, seemed to get more out of it than Luis Rivera and Sigfredo Garcia.
There's multiple deposits at different banks in the same day. So in an effort to ferret out who are all of the members of this conspiracy and to prove how information flowed, how was the conspiracy structured, we, on April 19th, 2016, so almost 2 years after the murder, law enforcement conducts an undercover operation. They got court authorization to go up on a wire, what's called a wire, on Catherine Magdanoa's phone and also Charlie Adelson's phone, which means they could listen in real time to what was being said on these phones. That's, despite some popular belief, not something the government normally can do without special authorization. In this case, that authorization was put in place, and law enforcement was prepared to listen to both Catherine Magdanoa's calls and Charlie Adelson's calls. They then sent an undercover agent posing as someone who basically was on behalf of Rivera to walk up to Donna Adelson on the street and basically try to extort money out of her. This undercover officer handed Donna Adelson a piece of paper. And on the paper is a story about the death of Dan Markel. It includes a photograph of Dan Markel, and written on the page is a phone number and the amount $5,000. And the undercover agent, I'm summarizing, tells Donna Adelson, basically, my buddy Rivera, he didn't say the word Rivera, but my buddy's sitting in jail, and you're out here taking care of Katie and Tudo. So basically, he's asking for $5,000 for Rivera to even things out. So now law enforcement starts listening to the calls. Like, you know, we do this little thing, it's 2 years after the murder, we do this undercover operation to try to generate some chatter and see who will say what to whom. And you'll get an opportunity to hear some of those phone calls that result from this undercover operation. That phone number, the undercover agent's phone number that's written on that piece of paper that's handed to Donna Adelson, you're going to see that it travels from Donna to Charlie to Katie and then to Sigfredo. You will hear and see evidence of these calls, and you can make of them what you will. But in conclusion, I believe that you will be convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that the state is not pulling a fast one on you, but rather that Catherine Magdanoa was hired to solicit Garcia, who in turn solicited Rivera to come to Tallahassee and to execute Mr. Markel in cold blood. At the conclusion of the evidence, I will ask you to return a verdict of guilty as charged for both defendants. Thank you.
Okay, so this is how it all started. An excellent opening statement by Georgia Kappelman. The rumor is that the only reason that they had a hung jury for Katie is because there was a woman who was pregnant on the jury who felt that, I mean, it's basically like you're nullifying the jury, didn't want to take Katie from her kids, which is a hard thing to do, to nullify a jury, basically. I was just on a jury I've said this before, but it was 11-1. We had one woman who just really didn't understand misunderstood the evidence. Just kind of said, like, I thought the defendant was credible over and over again. And just had to really pull it out of her, what she thought was so credible. And there was a lawyer also on the jury who said there was lots of reasons that you thought this. You have lots of reasons, and they're understandable, but they're not reasonable. Something. So for her to do that for days, I mean, you have 11 people basically just pressuring you to change your mind and to be the one holdout. If that is true, she were the one holdout. So I'm going to end this the way I end so many of my episodes about this case, with a victim impact letter. This was in the trial that we just watched the opening statement of, Sigfredo Garcia, a state of Florida versus Sigfredo Garcia and Catherine McBanoa. I met Danny Markel in the fall of 1996. We were both graduate students in the UK, with us both being from Toronto and having fairly similar backgrounds. Conversation and friendship came easily to us. I'm writing this letter to share with you how deeply impacted I was by the senseless murder of my dear friend. I knew Dan as a college friend, a young lawyer just starting out, with an eye for down the road to a career in an Ivy League academic environment, as a man in love with the, quote, most amazing and beautiful woman in the world, unquote, and finally as a caring and loving father to his 2 boys. Those boys meant the universe and beyond to him. He would do anything for them and often did. So I was saddened when one summer, while Dan and his spouse and boys were visiting with me and my husband at our home in Toronto, his spouse revealed to me privately that she believed she had married the wrong man, quote unquote. Later that evening, after Dan and his family had departed, I shared Wendy's confession to my husband, and we both said to one another something like, how sad, I'll probably end up being a single dad at some point, despite him being still madly in love with Wendi. How I wish that Dan were a single dad today, with his huge circle of friends, colleagues, family members, and loved ones, many of whom came to see Dan, almost as though he were family, myself included. I just know his life would have continued to be full of joy, love, generosity, humor, kindness, and warmth. His spirit was too indefatigable. Is that infatigable? His heart too full of love. He was too reliant to be brought low for long. He was murdered during a time of personal upheaval in his life, at a moment in time when he was indeed feeling low. And yet, he would speak during those anguish-filled months. He would start by saying, "How's Haley? How are you doing?" That was just Dan. Before closing, I'd like to share one story with you that says everything, to my mind, about how Dan envisioned how his marriage would be if he found the right partner. Many years before he and Wendi had met, while we were still in grad school, he told me that when he married, he hoped to find a woman who might feel exactly as he did. That when, for instance, upon visiting a doctor for this or that ailment, one of them would say, while the other nodded in agreement, "Doctor, we're here today because we're feeling pretty lousy about my husband's and wife ailment. Can you help us?" Losing Dan meant losing a bright and sparkly light in my life, a source of happiness and joy, a warm and loving friend who always looked out for those whom he loved. It is my deepest hope that justice is served through this and forthcoming trials. Sincerely, Haley Meslin, PhD, Toronto, Canada. And I'm going to go out with my hit song, "Oh Donna." I'll see you tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern. Have a great night, everyone. Thanks so much for listening. Please hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this episode, leave me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and I'll see you tomorrow at 6. Have a great night.
What a stitch you're in. You plotted a murder 'cause you wanted to raise your daughter's kid. Tallahassee is just a stop on the way to civilization. Miami is where all the fancy people are at. The TV is about 5. You can't get away from that. Two-toe, tay-toe, hoo-ho, you know the guy you pay, and you can't get away from that. Oh, Donna, what a stitch you're in. You thought jail was just for the little people, but now you sold blankets with the locked-up crew. Your grandmother is locked down, and your one-way ride to freedom you blew. What a stitch you're in. Your family are exiled from the social circles you swam in. We all know you never made that banana bread or offered to babysit for Dan, but you'll soon be making license plates and thinking about what could have been. Oh, Donna, you had to plan a murder